This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Jedley's award-winning children's book, The Great Maratini.
A very long time ago, there was a boy named Sam who liked to do his magic tricks, and he was quite the ham. He was called the Great Maratini, the best magician of his age, but his greatest feat took place far away from any stage. Every trick Sam tried to do would somehow come out wrong, but Sam just kept on going, and that's what made him strong. He was called the Great Maratini, the best magician of his age, but his greatest feat took place far away from any stage. One day as he traveled, he helped a stranger in need, and this was not a trick, oh no, but a magical good deed. He was called the Great Maratini, the best magician of his age, but his greatest feat took place far away from any stage. He was called the Great Maratini, the best magician of his age, but his greatest feat took place far away from any stage.
To get your autographed copy of the giant bilingual edition of The Great Maratini, please visit greatmaratini.com.
Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's a beautiful day here in beautiful Reedville, Massachusetts, a beautiful little neighborhood in the southwest corner of the city of Boston, where we are leading the way to inspire people to read more with their kids. And here's a book you want to read with your kids. It's called Owls Are Good at Keeping Secrets. And today we'll be meeting the author. Her name is Sara O'Leary. If you're the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And if you're the author of a great children's book, you are also the head of your business. That's right. And your business is the business of selling your great children's book. And you want to do it right. That's why I think you should check out readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile, INCFILE. readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile. Inkfile helps you quickly and easily form your LLC, S Corp, C Corp, or any other business. Start your business today for as little as $49 and state fees. There's no contracts. There's no hidden fees. Inkfile has been trusted by over 150,000 businesses worldwide since 2004. Check it out today. Remember, you are the head of a business once you write your great children's book. You want to do it right. Go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile, INCFILE, readingwithyourkids.com/inkfile. Joining us on the line right now for one of my favorite places in the world, Montreal in Quebec in Canada. She is the author of a beautiful new picture book called Owls Are Good at Keeping Secrets. It's a really fun, kind of different kind of alphabet book. Please welcome to the show, Sara O'Leary. Sara, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much.
Sara and I were chatting before the interview about the neat kind of friendly rivalry that Boston and Montreal have, and a lot of it revolves around our hockey teams. And but we really are good friends, I think. And I know anytime we go to Montreal, and anytime any of my friends talk about going to Montreal or Quebec City, we always have such a great time, and the people are so wonderful. And it is really. It's a beautiful city, and it's a way for somebody in the States to kind of travel to Europe without having to fly over that big ocean.
Yeah, that's right. You don't have to leave the ground. It's perfect.
Yes, yes, exactly. So tell us a little bit about Owls Are Good at Keeping Secrets.
Well, it's an alphabet book, which I really never expected to do. And it's a book about animals, which I also never really expected to do. It's the 10th picture book that I've done. which shocks me no end. And it's the first one with animals in it.
So I have to ask the question, if you never expected to do an alphabet book and you never expected to do a book with animals, what had you always envisioned yourself writing?
Most of my stories are sort of character-based, and so I've written a number of stories about a little boy named Henry. I've written a story about a little girl named Sadie, which is being turned into a stage show now and has had its own strange and interesting life. And so it's mostly children that interest me. Small children interest me. Animals in this book are sort of there in the place of children. They've got a lot of the same characteristics as toddlers do. And something about that struck me as comical and interesting to explore.
Now, one of the things that it says on the cover of Ours Are Good at Keeping Secrets is that it's an unusual alphabet book. What's so unusual about it?
What is unusual about it? Well, I think that it is absurd and whimsical and has sort of a touch of just the odd about it. It isn't A is for alligator, B is for, although it does come that way. Instead, it's giving you little so-called facts about each of the animals, which are really not so much facts as they are fictions. And so alligators think you'd like them if you got to know them. Iguanas get homesick on sleepovers. What else do I remember? Raccoons are always the first to arrive for a party. And so things that might be true of these animals, but are quite likely true of 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds that may be coming across the book.
Yeah. The one that hit me the most, just because I love them so much, elephants are happiest at bath time.
Yes, they are. And if you get hooked on some of those YouTube videos, I saw a video of an elephant stuck in a trough today and this other herd of elephants coming to rescue him. And I watched the whole thing and I thought, what am I doing? But it just makes you feel good. And thinking about elephants having baths is one of those things that just sort of makes you happy. It does.
And we host international students here in our home. And one of our international students, she's in medical school, but she seems like she's traveling the world. So I don't know how she has time for medical school. But anyway, she posted these wonderful pictures of her and an elephant in a stream, a little baby elephant. And she just looked so happy, and the elephant looked so happy. And I was so jealous. I wanted to be there with the elephant.
Well, the editor of this book, who's Maria Medano at Random House, told me after we finished the book that she's gone swimming with elephants and that it was one of the nicest experiences of her life. So I thought that was wonderful. Yeah.
Elephants are just these amazing creatures that I've had a little bit of interaction with. I'm a educational magician. I've had chances to perform in a number of different places, and one of them was at a zoo. And one of the coolest experiences I had, I was in the back of the house, kind of backstage at the zoo, bringing my equipment in, and just slowly wheeling up this path, and I just heard this sound come up from behind me, and I turned, and here was this beautiful elephant walking up the path with me. with one of the zookeepers, and it turned out that elephant had performed on television with one of my friends in magic.
Really?
Yes.
Strange experience, being
Very
snuck
strange.
up by an elephant,
Yes.
I would think.
You wouldn't think that an elephant could sneak up on someone.
No, I think there might be a story there.
Well, my wife would say it's just because I'm oblivious sometimes, but so since you didn't expect to write an alphabet book or a book about animals, how was the experience, and is it something that you think you might do again?
It was a lot of fun, actually. I had maybe more fun with this book than anything else I've ever done, partly just because it's so profoundly silly. The idea that I got away with publishing a book called Owls Are Good at Keeping Secrets satisfies me no end. The sort of ludicrous things that I managed to put in there, like unicorns. Unicorns believe in themselves.
Very
which
important.
just makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Of course. If they don't believe in themselves, who will?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's wonderful. When I'm speaking to you, I hear this real joy in your voice when you're talking about the animals, and I'm imagining part of that comes from you're imagining the reactions of kids reading this book and reading those silly kind of statements. What kind of reaction have kids had to the book?
This is an odd thing, I realize. I haven't really read it with any children yet. I've read it with a lot of adults.
Uh-huh.
It's only been out for about a week, so I haven't done any school visits yet, but I've done lots of bookshop visits and talked to a lot of people about the book. And it's interesting to watch people read it for the first time. Mm-hmm. They laugh, they chuckle, they do that little hand-on-heart sort of awe at some of the pictures in there that Jacob Grant has drawn, which are terribly, terribly sweet. Mm-hmm. And they always get to the end and feel compelled to tell me which animal they are. Always. Everybody has told me which animal they are, which wasn't something I expected, but they're really clear. And they really need me to know. And so I think that's great. It's really, it means that sort of point of identification is there for, not just 5-year-olds, but 50-year-olds or 20-year-olds or whoever it happens to be.
Yeah. Isn't that one of we've talked a little bit about this with some authors recently, and are you amazed sometimes at how your books, you're writing for kids, but how oftentimes your books are really touching and meaningful for adults?
I am probably a funny example for that because I sort of break the rules in that you're not supposed to write for adults, you're supposed to write for children. I write for children that are pre-readers, children that are being read to. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that interest me most. And it means that really I'm writing and imagining that moment of intimacy, which is a parent or a teacher or a sibling or whoever reading to a child. And really, I like that interaction between the child and the adult. And so the texts that I write are generally aware of both parties in that sort of transaction of reading a book together. Mm-hmm. So the first set of books that I wrote were about a boy asking his parents questions, and they were sort of sardonic and whimsical, and the illustrations by Julie Morstad were so beautiful that they sort of picked up this funny demographic. When people asked me what my demographic was, I would say 20-year-old women who knit, because that would seem to be who was buying the books. So I'm a little bit of an outlier there, I think.
Yeah. I love that you are mindful of your audience. And I certainly love that you break the rules because, my kind of relationship with children's literature is fairly new. I've been doing this for almost a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. And I know there are a lot of rules in kid lit and children's literature, and some of them don't make a lot of sense to me, but and
some of them are implicit. Some of them you don't know until you're a little ways into it. I've been teaching writing for children for a little while, and I've learned so much from teaching it because you have to sort of explain how things work. You can't just do it instinctively, which is the way I was doing it to begin with. Mm-hmm. And it means that you're looking a lot more closely at the form and at sort of the history of the form. And it's very interesting, but it is, I think it was Mem Fox who said writing a children's book is like trying to write War and Peace in haiku, and picture books are very particular form, and it takes a while to learn the form.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What advice would you give to I was going to say a young writer, but a new writer? Because there are a lot of writers who start later in life, and that's something I'm especially finding.
Emerging writer.
Yes. What advice would you give to those emerging writers?
Mainly to read picture books and find what you love, and not to be afraid to steal from things, to see what works and what doesn't work, and to read a lot, to go to the library and take a stack of books home with you and really study them and figure out what's happening, in the centerfold, what's the middle of the book, what's the beginning of the book, what's the end of the book, to really look at structure, because it's a new structure for most people. The students that I'm teaching, they're undergraduates, and so they haven't really read picture books in quite a few years. And they're also not at the stage of their life where they've had to read picture books to anybody else necessarily. And so that seems to be the thing that they really need, is to go back and read. And I think it's probably true for everybody. I started writing picture books after I'd gone through the stage of my life where I was reading picture books, 100 times over and really getting to know what that hungry caterpillar was up to.
You were talking earlier about writing with the idea that this is going to be read by an adult to a child. And as I'm looking back and remembering the books that I read to my kids, especially before they could read to themselves, and the ones that stand out, in addition to Dr. Seuss, which was just a fun physical thing to try to read. Some of them were easier than others. But there were a lot of books that really touched me. And the kids loved them. But, there were a couple of books that I remember I had a hard time getting through without crying myself. I tried real hard not to let my kids see me cry.
Right. Well, those ones are good too. I mean, as a writer, I like to make people laugh and I like to make people cry. And if I can do both in the same book, then I'm really, really happy. It's finding that emotional response, and that children react to things in quite honest and direct ways. And so if they like it. If you've read to, an auditorium full of 120 kids, whether or not your material is working.
One of the things that I was thinking of as we're speaking, and as you were speaking about, having that audience in mind when you're writing the books, is I noticed a really big difference, and I noticed it when my kids were younger, a really big difference in kid shows, kid media, especially in cartoons. I have very wonderful memories of a lot of the cartoons that I loved as a kid, and I saw them again as an adult, and I loved them again because it was really obvious that there were a couple of things going on. Bugs Bunny, there's stuff that kids love, but there's a whole other kind of humor going on that goes over the kids' heads and that adults love. And,
right.
As when my kids were younger and they were watching cartoons and even watching the baby Bugs Bunny cartoons, I didn't find that. It was just kind of silly stuff that was just shooting to make the kids laugh.
Right. In my books, there are things that make kids laugh and sort of separate things that make adults laugh. In the book, This is Sadie, which is about a little girl sort of having a series of adventures on her own, really. And it starts early in the morning with her hammering something. She's building some sort of structure out of wood and nails and playing her record player at the same time. And the line is, Sadie is quiet in the mornings because old people need a lot of sleep. And the parents always laugh because they know what that quiet entails, and they know how precious sleep is. Kids just take it for granted that she's doing something that makes perfect sense. And so you're sort of writing for both of those levels at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that is difficult, and maybe one reason we don't see it so much is that it's too difficult, or is there a commercial reason behind it?
If you see the sort of commercial stuff that's writing for different levels, like you think of something like, I don't know, Shrek, where the adult humor is actually quite crude and quite salacious, and is not appropriate. And I think you can still find a way to be funny and to be appealing to both audiences without pandering in any way. But yeah, maybe that is difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I know myself when I'm doing my educational magic shows, there's a few parts in the show where I'm in front of 400 or 500 kids, and there are maybe 12 adults in the audience. And there are absolutely moments in the show where, the kids are all rolling on the floor laughing. And then there are other moments where the kids are silent, but those 12 teachers will all just start giggling underneath their breath. And the kids will look at them going, "What's so funny?" And it's like, if you have to ask, you're not going to get it.
Yeah. I think with picture books, you really do have to acknowledge that the adults need to be at least slightly entertained, because otherwise they're going to leave it on the shelf, or worse yet, drop it behind the shelf, which I know I did with books I wasn't prepared to read again and again and again.
And just to keep the adults engaged, because I can't imagine that it's much fun for a kid listening to a parent just reading the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. So with this new book, I'm hoping that, yes, it is fun to read it out loud, and it is fun to read with somebody. There's a lovely illustration for V. The animal is vole, and the line is, voles always want one more story. And Jacob Grant has done this beautiful illustration of a vole sitting in its parents' lap and reading a book. And it's so universal, it's so much that moment.
What's it? I want to, talk about those emerging writers again, who maybe, they're hitting the wall and they're frustrated and they've sent out the query letters and they're not getting the responses back, but there's a little bit of encouragement. How much joy have you experienced with all of the work that you've done and all of the thousands and thousands of children and families that you've entertained with your books? What kind of words can you give to those emerging writers to kind of keep at it?
I tell my students that it really is the best possible job. I've written in all sorts of different forms. I was a newspaper reviewer for about 7 years. I wrote for radio. I wrote plays. I've written fiction. I've done just about everything you can imagine, tried to turn my hand to all these different forms of writing. I came to children's writing completely by accident, and it has turned out to be the greatest gift. It didn't occur to me that audience would matter that much to me in terms of what my work is, but seeing, and now with Instagram, you do see it. You see children holding your book, children reading your book, children fondling your book, and adults just don't. I'm sorry, but they don't, And even if they really, really love your novel, they're going to read it once.
Right.
They might read it twice. They are not going to read it 400 times, And so there's that too, the sense that you're becoming part of somebody's imaginative world. And it's such a key moment in their lives. I think of the books that I read when I was 4 and 5 and 6, and I remember them. They still echo around in my head, talk about Dr. Seuss, and I'm sure I can read those Dr. Seuss books with my eyes shut because I know them so well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You were talking about the books that you read. I have this very clear memory of, I think it was the very first book that was my own. That was a gift at a birthday. It was called Mr. Bear Goes to Boston. And it was about a black bear. And I have these memories of him at North Station. And that's the train station you go to in Boston when you want to go to Maine or when you want to go to Montreal.
Right.
And I remember, and that must have been 120 years ago. That was a long time ago. But I still have that memory. I've loved chatting with you. And just before you go, we talked a lot about the advice for emerging writers and the benefits, but talk a little bit more about what you see as the biggest benefit families can have by investing the time, and it is an investment, investing the time to read a great picture book like Owls Are Good at Keeping Secrets Together.
Well, there are so many studies now talking about just the difference that reading to your child has on so many aspects of their life, and it's not just a literacy issue. It's to do with all sorts of developmental things, and language at that stage, is so important. And I think that we're a little bit moving away from the Mother Goose and the nursery rhymes and the things that, the previous generation had. And what they were so important for was language and, sort of the mnemonic power of verse and just the sort of sense of the world that you get from reading is so important at that age. And those are children that are really at the beginning stages of developing empathy. And nothing promotes empathy more than reading. And that's something we need, now more than ever. I think our society needs empathetic members of our society.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm just imagining myself as a child kind of relating and having empathy for that elephant taking a bath.
Very good. Yes.
So tell everybody where they can go online to connect with you and find out what's coming up next from Sara O'Leary.
If you go to my publisher's site, there's information about this book and my other book. And so that's Penguin Random House, both in the United States and Canada. And other than that, I'm online. I'm not a very faithful blogger, but I do have a blog called 123 O'Leary, which again is a little sort of homage to early children's verse. And I used to review children's books on there. Now mostly I talk about what things I've been working on because that's what I'm doing most of the time.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're really happy that you had a chance to come and join us today. Is there a preview of a work that you're working on and that we may be able to see soon?
I had 2 books out this year, and it means that I have nothing out next year because that's the way it's going. And then the year after that, I have maybe 3 books in the works. I'm doing a book with Kennard Pack, and I don't know if you know his work, but he's wonderful. And it's called Maud and Grandmaud, and it's about a little girl who goes to grandmother's house and has a sleepover, and they have breakfast for supper and wear matching nightgowns and talk about the things that are important to them. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that one.
That's wonderful. Well, I hope you will find time in your schedule to come back and talk about that when it is available.
Well, thanks so much. I'd love that.
Excellent. Well, we've been talking today to the author of Owls Are Good at Keeping Secrets. Check it out. Beautiful, beautiful book. I was telling Sarah that it is already in my wife's classroom, and the kids there are loving it. Sara O'Leary has been our guest tonight. Sara, thank you so much for being part of our show.
Well, thank you for having me, Jed. I enjoyed it.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Sarah Ann Kinnear, the author of Little Pearl's Reflection. If you're the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it doesn't cost you a thing. You have an opportunity to tell thousands of people all over the world about your great children's book. It really is fun, easy, and like I said, it costs you absolutely nothing. All you need to do is to invest a little bit of time by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the contact button. Let us know all about your great book. We'll let you know the next easy steps. Hey, we want to thank Sara O'Leary for joining us today, talking to us about her great book and also giving us that great advice for authors. And we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.